We thought we'd give you a quick reminder of what the marking criteria are for your Year 12 Semester 1 presentation. This is for Unit 3 comparison of texts, and many of you are studying genres and how texts match that writing style. And you're comparing two texts across that. So when you look at the marking criteria, you'll see that it's vertical. Okay, and you start down here with the capabilities. This is what we want you to be able to do. So in other words, you're going to investigate texts and their use of genre conventions. That can be a bit tricky. Your ability to deliver an engaging oral presentation, and importantly, your referencing skills. Now these are really easy for you to target specific areas, and hopefully by looking at this criteria you can work out exactly what it is that we're looking for when you do your presentation. So let's start off with investigating texts and their use of genre conventions. In terms of the behaviours we want to see, we want you to construct a clear thesis. Now at the lower levels, this just means that you're presenting a thesis. You have a statement of belief. At the higher levels, you're going to draw links between your thesis and your analysis in your speech, continually referring back to your thesis. At the higher levels, in order to really demonstrate strong capability as a presenter, you're going to synthesize your evidence, which you've examined thoroughly, and link it back to your thesis consistently. Okay? We want an introduction from you that's going to establish the goals of your speech. Now, the easiest way to do that is simply to give us an overview of your speech at the start, or close to the start. However, if you want to do a little bit better, we expect you to frame your presentation with a clear, detailed and defined opening. We want to know exactly where you're going and what you're going to do over the course of your speech. What do you believe? That links into your thesis to some degree. At that top level of achievement, we want you to establish audience engagement through an interesting rhetorical device. Now, what that means is you're going to start us off with an interesting anecdote or a hypothetical situation, something that's going to engage our imagination and curiosity. We want to be interested in what you have to say, so give us a good reason to do so. All right, we need you, as per the task description, to critically analyse two texts. Now, simply put, that means you're going to present evidence about or from two texts. All right. However, we really want you to be drawing conclusions about both of those texts with evidence. Really important that you do that. All right. In order to really demonstrate the highest level of achievement, we want you to evaluate knowledge and critical understanding of genre using evidence from texts. In other words, we need you to explain how you know what you know, and to really critique the way the genre functions. Do you think that it is good that it does a particular thing? Do you think maybe that's a bit dated? Do you think perhaps there are better ways of doing this, or this is quite effective? And again, really important that you've got that evidence from the texts. All right. Finally, you've got to draw clear comparisons between those texts. Now, at the basic level, that means you're describing the texts, literary or modal features. For example, does it use metaphors? Do you use personification? If you're looking at a graphic novel or a film, what kind of visual techniques do you see? Of course, better than just describing something, you're going to compare and contrast those features. Now that's really good. That's what we're looking for at a C grade level, that you're being able to identify similarities and differences. Of course, if you want to do better than the C grade, then you're going to create a hypothesis on the potential meaning and purpose of both texts, perhaps juxtaposing them to some degree. But what do you think these texts mean? And why do you think that's important? Remember, a hypothesis is just your best educated guess. It doesn't have to be correct, but the more evidence you've got to support it, the more we're going to believe you. Finally, at the top level, you're going to justify the comparative effectiveness in relation to the genre. In other words, you're not just saying you think this is the case, you are really justifying it. You're proving to us that this is the case. And this term effectiveness here is quite important too, because you need to make some kind of judgment call. Look into what the word effectiveness means, and that might give you a bit of a clue. All right, of course this is an oral presentation, so it's really important that you interest us in the way you present. I know this can be one of the hardest parts of our assessment in the semester. And this word here, engaging, is super, super important. So our first thing here is we want you to speak with clarity and fluency. Can we hear you? That's really important. That's the very first step. If we can't hear you, you're not going to get any further in this particular track. Hopefully, you're going to use an appropriate tone and pace for your audience and purpose. Okay? If you're not 100% sure what tone and pace mean, tone is your the way your voice sounds, your intonation, and pace is how quickly you speak. For example, you might slow down in order to make a point and use that moment of pause to help it sink in. Of course, modulating tone and purpose means that you're going to change that consistently. Okay? Your tone and pace shouldn't be the same all the time. Changing it up a bit is going to help keep your audience engaged. We want you to use language appropriate to the task. Now, obviously, you're presenting to your teacher and you're presenting to your peers, and each teacher and each set of friends is going to have a slightly different expectation in what they'd like to see. Some teachers really, really like a no-nonsense, business-like, down to business, here's the facts man. Some teachers like you to throw in a little bit of comedy here and there. So if you're not entirely sure, make sure you check with your teacher what they're expecting or what they'd really like to see from you. At the basic levels though, your vocabulary is appropriate to audience. Your Year 12 students, we want you to use that meta language you've been learning for the last year and a half. Really show us that you've got what it takes to explain clearly and effectively using literary meta language. Of course, that level of meta language is super, super important. So if you're able to consistently use that throughout your speech, that's going to get you that C grade kind of area. Of course, at the top level, you're going to integrate your meta language with direct links between your analysis and your thesis. Remember, we talked about your thesis over here in criteria number 1. That's super important. Okay, so make sure that when you're using meta language, if you can link it directly to what you're trying to say and use it correctly, and then link that to your thesis, your overall belief, I think that's going to be the way that you can get the A there. That could be really good. All right. Of course, one of the hardest parts as well is being aware of how you're going to use your body language. Non-verbal communication is really important. So at the basic level, we want you to use gesture appropriately during your speech. Now, that doesn't mean that we want your hands flailing around all over the place. Just think about how you can maybe point or gesture, perhaps pointing to your presentation in a way that's going to help draw our attention to what you want to say. At the higher level, your use of body language is going to be gesture, head usage, and posture throughout your speech. Okay, that's really important. Of course, your head is where you're looking, and that ties into the next criteria a little bit. But you also want to consider your posture. Stand straight, stand tall, be proud. I know it's really scary to do that, but try it and fake it till you make it. Of course, that top level there is your consistent use of space and dynamic body language, which projects confidence and engages audience. Again, fake it till you make it. You don't have to feel confident as long as you look it. Okay, and we all get the shakes sometimes when we're presenting to our peers. Don't sweat it too much. We've all been where you are. It's not a big deal. Just do your best. Okay. Of course, this term dynamic means that you're going to be using it constantly and changing it. Don't just do the same thing. Now, this is where practice comes in. And this concept of space means that you don't just stand in the same spot the whole time. Of course, it also doesn't mean that you should move back and forth like we're on the high seas, or you're trying to win a walking contest. Think about how you can channel your nervous energy effectively. All right, using eye contact, that one that scares so many of us. At the basic level, you're making eye contact with your audience. Just once or twice, every sentence or two, just enough to keep it going. Now, the bonus here is, I don't actually know if you are making contact. You only have to look in the general direction of your audience. Give it a try. Even just flicking your eyes across the room, even though you have no idea what you see, that can be really effective because we don't know the difference. At the higher levels, you're making eye contact with the audience as a method for reinforcing important points. Now, this is a challenging skill. In order to let points sink in or to draw your audience's attention to ideas, you're going to make eye contact with specific people in order to draw their attention. Quite hard, but a very, very valuable skill, particularly in meetings, as you'll learn as you get older. Of course, at the top level, we want you to make more eye contact with the audience than you spend time looking at your script or support materials. Now, it's really simple, but what we want you to do here is essentially not rely on a script or your palm cards. Use your palm cards as a way to keep yourself on track, but we want you to make sure that you're talking with your audience, the people who care, and not the piece of paper, which I imagine probably doesn't. All right, that final one there is your use of support materials. What that looks like is that you've used visual materials. Does that mean you've used a video clip or some quotes up on the screen? Simply having a slideshow is good enough to get you that, whether the quality is a bit iffy or not. At our standard level here, you're reinforcing your spoken points with complementary visuals. Now, this means that you're not just rewriting every word you're saying in your speech on the screen. It means that your presentation has got additional points there that's fleshing out what you have to say. At the top level, we want you to integrate visuals seamlessly to support the structure of your speech and your analysis of text. Now, what that means is if you've got a quote, it's up on the board there for us all to see. And you don't necessarily read through the whole quote. You're saying, per this quote, you will see that blah, blah, blah. The author is trying to say that, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Integrating seamlessly. That's the key word for that one. Again, practice will make perfect for that. It's a great place to aim for, and I'd love for you to be able to start grasping that and demonstrating that as the year progresses. Finally, as is always expected, you have to provide a reference and bibliography list. It's just mandatory for all assessments at colleges. Now, that means we expect it's going to be there. So because it's going to be there, it's as simple as that. It's going to be there. So if you get anything wrong, that's going to be an insufficient evidence. Okay? We want you, however, to consistently use a recognized format. Minimal errors, everything's there, it's all correct. Okay? It doesn't matter what the format is as long as it exists. Now, in terms of what that looks like, it's easiest for you to have a final slide in your speech with your bibliography and reference list. Okay? Some teachers will require you to reference every single image that you have in your slideshow. I think that's best practice and you can't go wrong if you do that. Of course, in order to really score top marks there, you're going to be using a BSSS approved referencing format. Now, in the English faculty, we prefer Harvard as a method. Other faculties prefer footnoting. We prefer Harvard. So what's really important here is this concept of without error. If you can make sure that you have a bibliography and reference list that is without error in Harvard formatting, you'll get the full points for that. And that's just that little bit that's going to make a huge difference, and it could very well make the entire difference between a D and a C and a B, or a B and an A. All right, hopefully that's given you all the information that you need in order to understand the task. And if you've got any questions, I encourage you to have a chat to your teacher. Of course, read through your assignment sheet and make sure it's really clear what you're looking for. And good luck.